Hi, this is Semach Yehuda Richter again. I'm continuing my discussion of Rabbi S.I. Levin and a very important contribution he made to the area of Kashrut back in 1940 when it was published. I'm just holding up a copy of a reprint I did from the internet from the American Journal of Public Health. It was dated, if you look very closely, hopefully I can get it clear for you, July 1940. In this article, it mentions the book that was co-published by Rabbi S.I. Levin, and he is given credit as a senior rabbi in Minneapolis, along with Edward A. Boyan. The publisher was the University of Minnesota Press. In 1940, it was 243 pages, and the price at the time was $4.50. The publication was called The Kosher Code of the Orthodox Jew, and it dealt with various things regarding kashrut, and it was an extensive look into the kashrut as quoted in the Gemara and as quoted in many other sources. It also featured in the edition with a title, or at least the internet title, of Science. It was in volume 92, number 2382. And it also featured in the March 5th edition, 1940, of the Jewish Telegraphic Agency. And the agency mentioned that the Kosher Code of the Orthodox Jew is a literal translation of that portion of the 16th century codification of the Babylonian Talmud, which describes such deficiencies as render animals unfit for food. Authors of the volume, which also contains a discussion of Talmudic anatomy in the light of the science of its day and of the present time. Credit was given to Rabbi S.I. Levin, who I mentioned, I showed you a picture of, senior rabbi of Minneapolis, and Edward A. Boyan, professor of anatomy at the University of Minnesota. In the introductory note, it is explained that Rabbi Levin expresses the hope that the volume will be of use not only to theological students, but to everyone who is interested in these dietary laws and their origins in the culture of ancient Israel. Professor Boyan describes the translation as a contribution to the field of medical history. While discussing various things about Yiddishkeit, about being Jewish, and all the other things involved when I was becoming Shomer Shabbos, I also remember Rabbi Levin telling me about this book, but I was too much of a newcomer to Orthodox Judaism at the time, which was when I was in my mid-20s in the 70s, to actually appreciate what he was telling me. And I had no idea how important this book was at the time it was published, but it was obviously very important, and it was obviously something that only Rabbi Levin, who was a very learned person, as I was continuing to talk to him, would be able to publish. The Shul, the Melech's Chesed, I think I remember the name being, as I said last time, was a shul that was in a part of St. Louis Park that was not really populated by many religious Jews. The minions were very small. The minions were populated by older men, and I was one of the youngest that was attending the minyan. But it was my uncle from my mother's uncle from her side of the family. His name was Jake Liss, who was one of the founders of that shul, and his name and his parents' name were part of a cornerstone of the building when it was built. And so therefore, that's why I attended that shul, because we had some sort of a family connection. But when it came to people coming to Rav Levin and asking him shilas, asking him questions, I was basically his main and only customer at the time. I had the honor to know him. So having looked back at all the notes that I see from this book, and having understood how important and how learned this man was, I could never understand why he was not so busy answering shilas from other Jews who lived in the area. But that's how I grew up. I grew up with the thinking that Judaism is something on the level of a way to blend in with your fellow Jews, a way to act and behave according to Torah, but in the conservative way, which was that some of the things we followed in the Torah and some of the things we didn't follow in the Torah, and that was basically how I was raised. And so therefore, Rabbi Levin put me on the right road and showed me where and what to do when it came to becoming Shomer Shabbos. And that shul was on the other side of the railroad tracks. The Willow Park that I showed in a previous video on my channel, Tzemach Yehuda Richter, was located right off a street called Cedar Lake Road. It was a main street running all the way through St. Louis Park in the westward section, and it continued all the way toward downtown Minneapolis. It was a very busy street, and interestingly enough, if I turned left out of the street called Rhode Island Avenue, which was adjacent to Willow Park, I would continue onward down Cedar Lake Road to a street that was called Flag Avenue. It was less than probably 1 mile away, Flag Avenue. And if I would turn right on Flag Avenue, I would end up going down to the house where two brothers named Cohn, Ethan and Joel, grew up. But I just want to concentrate now my views and my reminiscing of Rabbi Levin as I knew him at that time. Because Rabbi Levin was very learned, he was very instrumental in giving me all the advice I needed. And there was never a time when he was silent, he refused to answer questions, because I was basically his main customer. And he would never know what I would ask him. He would never know what I was going to ask him. But whenever I did ask him questions, he always thought about it very heavily, and he always would give me an answer. I went away from Rabbi Levin very satisfied, and I wanted to therefore to tell everybody that the movie A Serious Man gives a very wrong impression of what St. Louis Park was all about, especially to someone like me who was raised conservative but eventually became Shomer Shabbos. So getting back to the book that Rabbi Levin published, here was the original announcement in the Jewish Telegraphic Agency dated March 5th, 1940. We are now in the year 2022. It was 1940 it was published. So therefore that book was published 82 years ago. And believe it or not, if you look on eBay and if you look on Amazon, you will still be able to see copies of that book that are being sold. So as I mentioned, in previous videos, and when I was writing at Times of Israel, which I don't write for them anymore. I've left writing for them about a year ago. I must tell you that it was very interesting for me to discover a very amazing story that was published next to the story that announced this book. The story was published also on in the March 5th edition, 1940, and it involved the, as we call in Chabad, the Frierdiker Rebbe. What that story was about, I am not telling you. I'm only going to be telling you in the next and upcoming video. So just to be quoting Paul Harvey, who my dad and I used to listen to on the radio all the time, please stay tuned to Tzemach Yehuda Richter's channel, and I'll be more than happy to tell you the rest of the story. Call 2.